The first warning came as a subtle distortion in the quantum communication array. Jake Reardon's fingers hovered over the holographic display, tracing the anomalous signal pattern that shouldn't exist. Epsilon Horizon had been designed as the perfect camouflage, a seemingly unremarkable mining colony on the galactic frontier, its true purpose hidden beneath layers of intentional mediocrity. Wind-swept dust storms constantly battered the colony's exterior, creating a perpetual haze that obscured the advanced defensive systems carefully integrated into the landscape. To any casual observer, it looked like nothing more than a rough frontier settlement, complete with weathered prefab structures and mining equipment that appeared decades old. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez, the colony's chief of advanced research, stepped into the control room. Her uniform bore no insignia, another deliberate choice in their carefully constructed facade. "Incoming quantum signature," she announced, her voice calm despite the tension crackling through the air. "Zarkil Scout configuration. Looks like they're doing a standard border sweep." Jake studied the holographic representation of the incoming vessels. Each one was a marvel of alien engineering. Crystalline hulls that seemed to shimmer between solid and energy states, weapon systems that could reduce most colonies to atomic dust in seconds. But the Zarkil didn't know what lurked beneath Epsilon Horizon's deceptive exterior. "Activate perimeter masking," Jake commanded. A series of quantum dispersal fields rippled across the colony's surface, further obscuring their true capabilities. The mining equipment began to subtly reconfigure, hidden weapon systems sliding into place behind holographic projections of ordinary industrial machinery. In the underground research complex, Dr. Emily Harper watched the incoming ships with a mixture of scientific curiosity and predatory anticipation. Her team had spent years developing technologies that would fundamentally challenge everything the Zarkil understood about warfare. This would be their first real-world test. The scout ships entered the system with the arrogance of a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Their communication systems pinged out standard invasion protocols, scans, threat assessments, preliminary bombardment vectors. They expected minimal resistance, another quick subjugation of a frontier colony. What they didn't realize was that Epsilon Horizon was anything but typical. Deep within the planet's crust, a network of quantum-linked defense systems began to wake up. Nanofabrication arrays hummed to life, molecular reconfiguration systems preparing for potential conflict. The entire colony was a single integrated weapon system, each component capable of adapting and responding faster than any known alien technology could predict. "They're locking targeting systems," Maria reported, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Preliminary bombardment sequence initiated." Jake allowed himself a slight smile. Let them think they have the advantage. The first energy weapons discharge, brilliant lances of plasma that should have vaporized any standard colonial defenses. Instead, they encountered something entirely unexpected. The colony's surface seemed to absorb the energy, quantum dispersal fields breaking down the plasma into harmless component particles. In the research complex, Emily Harper began running the first phase of their adaptive response protocol. Quantum-entangled defense networks started mapping the Zarkil weapon signatures, creating real-time countermeasures that would evolve faster than the aliens could comprehend. "Weapon analysis complete," a synthetic voice reported. The defense AI was a marvel of human innovation, not a rigid combat system, but a flexible, learning network that could rewrite its own operational parameters in milliseconds. The Zarkil scout commander, viewing the initial assault through long-range sensors, felt the first hint of confusion. Their targeting systems reported no significant damage, no colony-wide destruction. Something was fundamentally wrong with this engagement. Jake Reardon watched the incoming ships with the calm of a predator observing its prey. "Prepare adaptive response," he murmured to Maria. "Let's show them what happens when they underestimate humanity." The colony of Epsilon Horizon was about to become a lesson in technological warfare, a demonstration that would echo through the galactic community. The Zarkil thought they were conducting a routine border patrol. They were actually walking into a carefully prepared trap that would redefine their understanding of human capabilities. First contact was about to get very interesting. The full might of the Zarkil fleet descended like a metallic plague. Thousands of ships materialized from quantum slipstreams, their crystalline hulls reflecting the light of Epsilon Horizon's twin suns. Grand Strategist Krelax watched through his ship's enhanced viewscreen, expecting another swift subjugation that would add another footnote to the hegemony's endless conquest. In the command center of the human colony, Jake Worden stood motionless, his eyes tracking the incoming armada. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez worked furiously at the quantum interface, her fingers a blur of motion, as she coordinated the colony's defensive systems. "Full deployment sequence," Jake commanded. The words seemed almost casual, but they triggered a transformation that would rewrite the understanding of interstellar warfare. The landscape of Epsilon Horizon began to shift. What appeared moments ago to be simple mining equipment and rocky terrain suddenly revealed its true nature. Massive defensive structures emerged from hidden quantum-folded spaces, unfolding like mechanical flowers of destruction. Weapon systems that defied conventional physics rose from seemingly solid ground, their designs so advanced they looked more like living organisms than conventional armaments. Dr. Emily Harper's voice crackled over the communication channel. "Adaptive defense networks are coming online. Preliminary scans suggest the Zarkil have committed approximately 73% of their local battle group to this assault." Jake's lips curled into a slight smile. "More than enough to demonstrate our point." The first wave of Zarkil ships launched their initial assault, plasma weapons that had reduced entire civilizations to cosmic dust. But Epsilon Horizon was no ordinary colony. The incoming energy weapons encountered quantum dispersal fields that didn't just deflect the attack, but actively consumed and redistributed the energy. Nanoswarm defense mechanisms erupted from beneath the planet's surface. These weren't simple robotic defense systems, but complex, adaptive networks that could reconfigure themselves faster than the Zarkil could track. Each nanoconstruct was a miniature computer, capable of independent decision-making and instantaneous cooperation with millions of its siblings. Grand Strategist Krelax watched in growing horror as his battle formations began to disintegrate. The human colony didn't just defend. It actively counterattacked in ways that defied everything in the Zarkil military doctrine. "Impossible," he muttered, watching as entire squadrons of his most advanced warships were systematically pulled apart by adaptive weapon systems that seemed to predict and counter every strategic move. Maria's voice cut through the tension. "Quantum tracking confirms total disruption of their communication networks. They're operating blind." The colony itself became a weapon. Underground facilities that appeared to be simple mining complexes transformed into advanced weapon platforms. Energy conduits that looked like simple infrastructure revealed themselves as sophisticated targeting systems. Every square meter of Epsilon Horizon was a potential point of destruction. Zarkil boarding parties that attempted to land found themselves caught in fields of molecular reconfiguration. Their advanced combat suits were systematically dismantled, their weapons turned into harmless components before they could fire a single shot. It was as if the very planet was alive, actively resisting the invasion. Emily Harper's research team worked in perfect synchronization, their adaptive AI systems learning and responding to Zarkil tactics faster than the aliens could adapt. Each attack was not just defended against but analyzed, with countermeasures developed in real time. "They're attempting a concentrated energy bombardment on the Western Quadrant," Maria reported. Before she could finish the sentence, the defense systems had already identified the attack vector, created a quantum dispersion field, and were preparing a targeted counterattack. Jake watched the battle unfold with the calm of someone who knew the outcome was never in doubt. This wasn't just a defense. It was a comprehensive demonstration of human technological superiority. The Zarkil fleet began to break apart, not through brute force, but through a systematic deconstruction of their entire military philosophy. Their ships were being turned against them, their communication systems transformed into weapons, their advanced technologies rendered useless by an adaptive defense network that seemed to think and evolve in real time. Grand Strategist Krellex realized they were no longer conducting a military operation. They were participating in a fundamental lesson about the nature of human innovation. Epsilon Horizon was teaching the Zarkil hegemony, a lesson they would never forget. The quantum slitstream tore open like a wound in the fabric of space, revealing the full might of humanity's response fleet. Admiral Rachel Holbrook stood on the bridge of the U.S. Horizon, her steely gaze fixed on the holographic display that mapped the ongoing conflict at Epsilon Horizon. This was no ordinary military deployment. Each ship in the fleet represented decades of advanced research, technological innovation that pushed the boundaries of known physics. They were living weapons, adaptive systems that could reconfigure themselves faster than any traditional spacecraft could process a single command. Communication intercept complete. Commander David Chen reported from the tactical station. Zarkil command structure is in complete disarray. Their losses at Epsilon Horizon have triggered a total strategic collapse in 3 adjacent star systems. Rachel allowed herself a momentary smile. The fleet wasn't just a military response. It was a statement. Humanity would no longer be viewed as a minor species to be conquered or overlooked. The ships began to deploy in formations that defied conventional military doctrine. Where traditional fleets moved in rigid, predictable patterns, these vessels seemed to flow like liquid mercury. Quantum entanglement drives allowed instantaneous repositioning, while adaptive hull systems could reconfigure molecular structures to absorb or deflect incoming weapon systems. Dr. Olivia Martinez, the chief scientific officer, monitored the fleet's adaptive responses. Her team had spent years developing technologies that blurred the line between ship, weapon, and living organism. Each vessel was more than a machine. It was a complex, evolving system capable of independent strategic reasoning. Zarkil battle groups are attempting to regroup, David announced. They're pulling resources from 3 peripheral star systems. Rachel's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Let them concentrate their forces. We'll show them the true meaning of asymmetric warfare. The first wave of Zarkil defenders approached. Their ships a massive crystalline formation that had subjugated countless civilizations. They expected to find a traditional military response, line formations, predictable weapon systems, standard engagement protocols. Instead, they encountered chaos made manifest. Human ships didn't just move, they anticipated. Weapon systems that would take most species milliseconds to target were already being countered before they could be fully deployed. Quantum predictive algorithms allowed the human fleet to see potential battle scenarios before they could fully develop. Adaptive camouflage at maximum efficiency, Olivia reported. The ships could now shift their molecular structure to match surrounding space, becoming virtually invisible until the moment of attack. The Zarkil fleet found itself fighting an enemy that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Ships would appear and disappear, their weapon signatures changing faster than targeting systems could lock on. It was like trying to fight a ghost that could simultaneously be in multiple locations and strike with devastating precision. Grand Strategist Krellex watched in mounting horror from his command ship. The human response was nothing like the countless military engagements the Zarkil had conducted over millennia. This wasn't just warfare. It was a fundamental reimagining of conflict itself. They're not just defending, he muttered to his senior tactical officer. They're dismantling our entire concept of military engagement. Each human ship was a complete ecosystem of adaptive technology. Nano-repair systems could rebuild damaged sections faster than traditional weapon systems could cause destruction. Quantum communication networks allowed instantaneous strategic coordination that made the Zarkil's most advanced communication systems look like primitive radio transmissions. Rachel Holbrook's strategy was clear. This wasn't about total destruction, but about demonstrating a level of technological and strategic superiority that would fundamentally reshape galactic power dynamics. Initiate Protocol Omega, she commanded. The human fleet began to move in patterns that seemed to defy the basic laws of spatial mechanics. Ships would momentarily phase out of traditional space, reappearing in locations that should have been impossible to reach. Weapon systems that struck Zarkil ships would ripple through their defenses like water, dismantling entire battle groups with surgical precision. It was a ballet of destruction, choreographed by algorithms that could process more potential scenarios in a microsecond than the Zarkil could in an entire solar cycle. The message was clear. Humanity was no longer a species to be conquered. They were a force of technological evolution that would reshape the very understanding of conflict in the galaxy. The quantum communication network pulsed with an almost living energy. Dr. Emily Harper watched the holographic displays, her eyes tracking the complex web of data streams that were systematically dismantling the Zarkil's entire technological infrastructure. This was warfare beyond traditional understanding, a conflict fought in the realm of information, algorithms, and adaptive intelligence. The human approach to technological warfare was less about destruction and more about fundamental transformation. Communication infiltration at 62% completion, remarked Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez, his fingers dancing across the quantum interface. The screens before him displayed a constantly shifting landscape of data, each node representing a potential point of strategic intervention. The Zarkil communication networks, once considered the most secure in the known galaxy, were being systematically unraveled. What made the human approach so devastating was its organic nature. These weren't simple hack attempts or brute force intrusions. Each interaction was a living, evolving process of technological adaptation. Emily's research team had developed something far beyond traditional artificial intelligence. Their systems were quantum adaptive cognitive networks, computational organisms that could learn, predict, and reconstruct themselves faster than any known technological defense could respond. Initiating deep-level pattern analysis, Michael announced. The holographic displays began to shift, revealing intricate pathways of data that seemed to breathe and pulse with an almost organic rhythm. The Zarkil had built their entire civilization on the premise of technological superiority. Their communication systems were designed with multiple layers of encryption, quantum-locked channels, and adaptive security protocols that had successfully defended against hundreds of species' attempts at infiltration. They never anticipated an approach like this. Human cognitive networks didn't just break through barriers. They fundamentally reimagined them. Each attempted defense by the Zarkil was instantaneously analyzed, decoded, and transformed. Their most secure communication channels became transparent, their strategic discussions laid bare. Admiral Rachel Holbrook reviewed the incoming data streams from her command center. "They're trying to isolate their core communication hub," she remarked to her chief strategist. "But they don't understand. We're not just attacking their network. We're rewriting its fundamental nature." The infiltration was surgical. Where traditional cyber warfare would seek to destroy or disable systems, the human approach was far more subtle. They were transforming the Zarkil's own technological infrastructure, turning their most secure systems into conduits of their own vulnerability. Quantum-entangled data packets moved through the alien networks like a living fluid. They didn't just carry information. They were information that could adapt, learn, and reconstruct itself in real time. Each packet was a miniature computational ecosystem, capable of making independent strategic decisions. "We're witnessing a complete paradigm shift," Dr. Olivia Martinez noted, studying the evolving data streams. "This isn't just technological warfare. It's a fundamental reimagining of communication itself." The Zarkil discovered their most secure communication channels were being systematically transformed. Strategic discussions meant to be private were now transparent. Military plans were not just intercepted, but actively rewritten, with the aliens unknowingly broadcasting their own vulnerabilities. Grand Strategist Krelax watched in mounting horror as his communication networks began to betray him. What had once been impenetrable quantum-locked channels now felt like glass walls, every strategic whisper exposed and analyzed. The human approach was psychological as much as it was technological. By revealing the Zarkil's internal communications, by showing their fears and strategic uncertainties, they were dismantling more than just a communication network. They were destroying the very concept of the Zarkil's technological superiority. Complete network mapping in progress, Michael reported. The holographic displays now showed the Zarkil's entire communication infrastructure as a living, breathing entity, each node revealing its secrets, each pathway transparent and malleable. Emily Harper understood the deeper significance of what they were achieving. This wasn't just about winning a conflict. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to technological interaction, one where adaptation, learning, and transformation were the primary weapons. The Zarkil were experiencing a nightmare beyond their comprehension. Their most advanced technology was being turned against them, their most secure systems becoming windows into their own vulnerabilities. Technological warfare would never be the same again. The Zarkil hegemony's central command complex trembled, not from physical assault, but from the complete unraveling of their civilizational infrastructure. Grand Strategist Krulak stood in the central holographic chamber, watching as everything his species had built began to disintegrate. It wasn't a military defeat in the traditional sense. This was a complete systemic collapse that touched every aspect of Zarkil's society. Their hierarchical structure, which had remained unchanged for millennia, suddenly revealed itself as fundamentally fragile. Communication networks are fully compromised, reported Sub-Strategist Threll, his voice barely above a whisper. The once proud communication officer looked like a shell of his former self, the weight of total technological defeat crushing his spirit. Each layer of Zarkil society began to unravel. Their military command structure, their economic networks, their cultural information systems, all were being systematically exposed and transformed. The human approach was surgical, almost clinical in its precision. Admiral Rachel Holbrook reviewed the ongoing deconstruction from her advanced command center. "It's not about destruction," she explained to her senior staff. "We're demonstrating the fundamental weakness of a civilization built on rigid technological assumptions." The humans had done something far more devastating than simply defeating the Zarkil militarily. They were dismantling the very concept of the hegemony's technological superiority. Every system the Zarkil believed was secure was now a transparent window into their deepest vulnerabilities. Dr. Emily Harper monitored the systemic breakdown, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "Their societal infrastructure is so interconnected that our infiltration is causing cascading systemic failures," she reported. Zarkil colonies across multiple star systems began to experience total communication blackouts. Economic systems collapsed as their quantum-locked financial networks became completely transparent. Military deployment strategies were instantly exposed, rendering entire battle groups obsolete before they could even mobilize. Grand Strategist Krulak understood the true horror of their situation. This wasn't just a military defeat. This was a fundamental challenge to everything the Zarkil believed about technological supremacy and societal structure. "We assumed technological complexity meant invulnerability," Krulak muttered to himself. "But humans have shown us that true strength lies in adaptability, not rigidity." The quantum adaptive networks developed by human researchers were unlike anything the Zarkil had encountered. These weren't simple computer systems, but living, evolving computational organisms that could learn, predict, and reconstruct themselves faster than any known technological defense. Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez watched the systemic breakdown with a mixture of professional detachment and scientific fascination. "We're not just defeating them," he explained to a junior communications officer. "We're revealing the fundamental flaws in their entire approach to technological development." Entire Zarkil research facilities found their most secure databases completely exposed. Centuries of technological research, proprietary developments, and strategic planning were now open books. The psychological impact was perhaps even more devastating than the technological collapse. Dr. Olivia Martinez analyzed the deeper implications of their approach. "It's about demonstrating that technological superiority is not about complexity, but about adaptability," she noted. "The Zarkil built walls. We created living systems that could flow around, through, and beyond those walls." The breaking point came not with a massive explosion or a decisive battle, but with a quiet, systematic deconstruction of everything the Zarkil believed about technological warfare. Their most secure systems became their greatest vulnerabilities. Sub-strategist Vrel approached Krulax with a final report. Our entire communication infrastructure is compromised. Every system we believed was secure has been systematically transformed. The Central Command Complex, once a symbol of Zarkil technological might, now felt like a glass house with every wall transparent. Secrets that had been protected for generations were now laid bare, exposed to a level of analytical insight they couldn't comprehend. We are witnessing the death of an entire technological paradigm, Krulax said softly, more to himself than to anyone else. Humanity had done more than defeat the Zarkil. They had fundamentally challenged the very concept of technological superiority, revealing that true strength lies not in building impenetrable systems, but in creating adaptive, living technologies that could evolve faster than any potential threat. The Zarkil hegemony was experiencing its final moments, not with a bang, but with a quiet, systematic deconstruction that would be remembered as a turning point in galactic technological understanding. The psychological warfare began with a whisper, not a roar. Captain Jake Worden understood that true victory extended far beyond military conquest. It was about dismantling an entire civilization's sense of self. Zarkil communication networks became conduits of their own destruction. Every classified transmission, every strategic discussion, every moment of doubt and fear was systematically exposed and broadcast across their entire interstellar network. The humans weren't just intercepting communications, they were weaponizing information itself. Admiral Rachel Holbrook reviewed the strategic approach with her senior team. We're going to show them the true nature of their society, she explained, her fingers tracing holographic projections of communication pathways. Every secret becomes a weapon. Every moment of vulnerability becomes a tool of deconstruction. Dr. Emily Harper's research team had developed something far beyond traditional psychological warfare techniques. Their adaptive information networks could not just intercept communications, but could recontextualize them in ways that would systematically erode the Zarkil's collective confidence. Psychological deconstruction protocol initiated, Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez announced. The command center hummed with a quiet intensity, each team member understanding the profound nature of what they were about to do. The first wave of psychological intervention was surgical. Confidential communications between high-ranking Zarkil military leaders were broadcast across their entire communication network. Private doubts, strategic uncertainties, moments of personal weakness, all became public spectacle. Grand strategist Krulax watched in horror as the most intimate conversations of the hegemony's leadership were laid bare. Discussions that were meant to be private revelations of strategic planning became weapons of mass psychological destruction. Zarkil colonies began to experience widespread social breakdown. The carefully maintained illusion of technological and cultural superiority was systematically dismantled. Every transmission revealed the cracks in their societal infrastructure, the lies, the manipulations, the fundamental weaknesses that had been hidden for generations. We're not destroying them, Emily explained to her team. We're holding up a mirror. Their greatest weapon has always been their belief in their own superiority. We're simply revealing the truth beneath that belief. The psychological assault was multifaceted. Military communication showed strategic incompetence. Economic reports revealed systemic corruption. Cultural transmissions exposed deep-seated societal tensions that the hegemony had carefully suppressed for centuries. Sub-strategist Vrel, once a proud communication officer, now found himself at the center of a total systemic collapse. The communication networks he had believed were impenetrable were now complete windows into the Zarkil's most profound vulnerabilities. Jake Worden understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to conflict. Humanity was showing that true power came from transparency, adaptability, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Zarkil research facilities found their most guarded secrets exposed. Technological developments that were meant to maintain their galactic dominance were now open books. The psychological impact was devastating. Centuries of carefully maintained mystique were stripped away in moments. Information is the most powerful weapon, Rachel told her team. We're not just fighting a military conflict. We're challenging an entire civilization's understanding of itself. The adaptive information networks developed by human researchers were living systems. They didn't just expose information. They could recontextualize it, create narrative frameworks that would fundamentally reshape how the information was understood. Entire Zarkil colonies began to experience mass psychological destabilization. The rigid hierarchical structure that had maintained their society for millennia began to crumble as every level of leadership was exposed, their vulnerabilities laid bare for all to see. Dr. Olivia Martinez analyzed the deeper implications. We're demonstrating that true strength isn't about hiding weaknesses, she noted. It's about having the courage to confront them, to learn, to adapt. The psychological war reached its peak when the most intimate personal communications of the Zarkil leadership were broadcast. Private moments of doubt, personal failures, hidden weaknesses, all became public spectacle. The carefully maintained image of invulnerability was systematically dismantled. The communication request came through the quantum networks like a last desperate breath. Grand strategist Krelax, once the most powerful military leader in the Zarkil hegemony, now sought a final audience with human leadership. The irony was not lost on Admiral Rachel Holbrook as she reviewed the incoming transmission. They want to understand, she remarked to Dr. Emily Harbour, who stood nearby analyzing the communications quantum signature. After everything, they still believe there's some technological secret that they're missing. The Human Command Center was a study in controlled intensity. Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez monitored the quantum communication channels, ensuring every nuance of the conversation would be preserved and analyzed. This was more than a surrender. It was a moment of profound cultural intersection. Krelax appeared on the holographic display, his once imposing form now seeming diminished. The grand strategist who had commanded fleets that subjugated entire civilizations now looked like a student preparing to receive a crucial lesson. "We demand to understand," Krelax began, his voice carrying a mixture of desperation and lingering pride. "How did you develop such remarkable adaptive capabilities?" Rachel Holbrook's response was measured, almost philosophical. "It's not about technology," she explained. "It's about our approach to existence." The humans began to unfold a narrative that would fundamentally challenge everything the Zarkil understood about technological and cultural development. They spoke of a planet of constant challenges, Earth, a world that had forced its inhabitants to constantly reinvent themselves to survive. Dr. Olivia Martinez stepped forward, her explanation a blend of scientific insight and cultural anthropology. "Humanity's strength comes from our ability to see challenges as opportunities," she explained. "Where your civilization built walls, we learned to flow around them." The revelation was devastating in its simplicity. The Zarkil had built their entire civilization on the premise of technological superiority. Rigid systems designed to maintain control and prevent change. Humans had developed something fundamentally different, adaptive intelligence that saw change not as a threat, but as the most natural state of existence. Jake Worden added context to the explanation. Every technological breakthrough in human history came from someone looking at an impossible challenge and asking, "What if we approach this differently?" He shared examples, from early agricultural innovations to space exploration, that demonstrated humanity's core strength. Krelax and his remaining leadership team listened in stunned silence. The humans were not describing a technological secret, but a fundamental approach to existence. It was a philosophy of adaptation, of seeing limitations as opportunities for transformation. "Your civilizations build to last," Emily Harbour explained. "Ours build to evolve. We don't create technologies. We create living systems that can transform themselves." The quantum communication channels captured every moment of this profound revelation. Zarkil researchers and military leaders across multiple star systems were witnessing a complete deconstruction of their understanding of technological development. Lieutenant Rodriguez noted the psychological impact in real time. The communication networks were showing complete systemic shock, a civilization experiencing a fundamental reimagining of its own potential. Rachel Holbrook delivered the final insight. Technological superiority isn't about complexity, she explained. It's about the capacity to learn, to transform, to see beyond your current limitations. Krelax understood then that this was more than a military defeat. This was a complete transformation of their civilizational understanding. The Zarkil had spent millennia building increasingly complex systems designed to prevent change. Humans had developed systems designed to embrace change. The surrender was almost anticlimactic. There were no dramatic terms, no complex negotiations. The Zarkil simply recognized that they were witnessing a fundamentally different approach to existence, one that made their entire civilization's philosophy obsolete. "We surrender," Krelax finally said, the words carrying the weight of a complete cultural collapse. "Not to your weapons, but to your understanding." Dr. Olivia Martinez shared a look with her colleagues. This wasn't a moment of triumph, but of profound cultural exchange. They had not conquered the Zarkil. They had offered them a new way of understanding themselves and their place in the universe. As the communication ended, the human leadership understood that this was more than a military victory. This was a moment that would reshape galactic understanding of technological and cultural development. The price of provoking humanity had been paid in full, a lesson written in the language of adaptation, transformation, and the relentless human capacity to reimagine the impossible. The galactic community watched in stunned silence as the Zarkil hegemony underwent its most profound transformation. What had begun as a military conflict had become a watershed moment in interstellar relations, a complete reimagining of technological and cultural development. Admiral Rachel Holbrook stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting what was once the central Zarkil homeworld. The planet below had already begun its metamorphosis, its rigid infrastructure giving way to more adaptive fluid systems. "It's not about conquest," she explained to the assembled diplomatic courts from dozens of star systems. "It's about showing that there's another way to exist." Captain Jake Worden reviewed the initial reports of the Zarkil's systemic reconstruction. Former military colonies were transforming into research centers, their advanced technologies being repurposed toward collaborative scientific exploration. The change was so fundamental that it defied traditional understanding of post-conflict resolution. Dr. Emily Harper's research teams were at the forefront of this transformation. They weren't just observing. They were actively working with Zarkil scientists to reimagine their entire approach to technological development. Each interaction was a delicate dance of cultural exchange, of showing rather than telling. Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez managed the initial integration efforts. Former Zarkil military installations were being converted into joint research facilities, with human and Zarkil scientists working side by side. The rigid hierarchies that had defined Zarkil society were being systematically dismantled and replaced with more collaborative structures. The economic implications were profound. Zarkil trade networks, once designed for absolute control, were being transformed into open, adaptive systems. Dr. Olivia Martinez noted that this was more than an economic shift. It was a complete reimagining of interstellar commerce. "We're not rebuilding their civilization," Rachel explained during a key diplomatic briefing. "We're helping them discover their own potential for adaptation." Entire star systems that had been under Zarkil control began to experience unprecedented levels of cultural and technological exchange. Member species that had been brutally suppressed under the hegemony's rule found themselves experiencing freedoms they had never imagined possible. Jake Worden understood the deeper significance of what was happening. This wasn't a traditional post-war reconstruction. This was a fundamental transformation of an entire civilization's approach to existence. The most surprising development came from the Zarkil themselves. Grand strategist Krelax, once the most feared military leader in the galaxy, had become a key advocate for systemic transformation. His personal journey became a symbol of the broader cultural shift. "We misunderstood the nature of strength," Krellax told a panel of galactic observers. "We believed it was about maintaining control. We've learned it's about the capacity to change." Research facilities that were once dedicated to military technological development were now open collaborative spaces. The most advanced Zarkil technologies were being shared, not as weapons, but as potential solutions to complex galactic challenges. The diplomatic station became a hub of unprecedented cultural exchange. Species that had been enemies for generations found themselves working together, sharing technologies, exploring collaborative approaches to scientific and social challenges. Emily Harper's team developed joint research protocols that emphasized adaptability over rigid scientific methodologies. Each project became an exercise in cultural understanding, breaking down the barriers that had previously defined interstellar relations. Michael Rodriguez oversaw the initial cultural integration programs. Former Zarkil military personnel were being retrained in collaborative problem-solving, their strategic skills being redirected toward scientific and humanitarian efforts. The economic transformation was equally profound. Trade networks that were once designed for absolute control became open, adaptive systems. Planets that had been resource extraction sites were now being developed as collaborative research and cultural exchange centers. Olivia Martinez noted the broader implications. "This is more than a technological shift," she explained. "This is a fundamental reimagining of how civilizations can interact." Rachel Holbrook understood that this was the true victory, not the defeat of an enemy, but the creation of a new model of interstellar cooperation. The humans had not conquered the Zarkil. They had offered them a path to a different way of existing. As the first joint human-Zarkil research vessels prepared to explore uncharted regions of space, it became clear that something profound had changed. The galactic community was witnessing the birth of a new approach to interstellar relations, one based on adaptation, collaboration, and the endless potential of transformation. The price of provoking humanity had been paid in full. But the true payment was not in destruction, but in the discovery of a more profound way of understanding existence itself.